Welcome to another episode of Full Build Friday, where I try to build a character from a comic, game, or similar source using the baseline rules of Pathfinder 2nd Edition and the Path Builder app. You may have noticed that this week was missing a Monster Monday, and that is because I've been struggling a little bit getting everything together. It will be back this upcoming Monday, but that's not what you're here for. No, you're here for the latest Full Build Friday, and I'm happy to present the League's very own Grand Duelist, Fiora Laurent.
I long for a worthy opponent.
Before we can take up the blade, we must work on our fundamentals, by which I mean our build goals. Fiora is the current head of the Laurent family, a position she claimed after slaying her father in a duel necessitated by a scandal the family underwent. Ever since, Fiora has been trying to restore her family's glory and honor, while sharpening her skills as a near unparalleled duelist. In-game, she is defined as a skirmisher, an agile melee damage dealer that has situational defenses and powerful sustained damage. Encouraging this playstyle is Duelist Stance, a passive which periodically identifies vitals on an enemy. If Fiora can strike a vital, she deals extra damage, heals herself, and gains a burst of movement speed. Helping her get around to those vitals is her lunge, which simply causes her to dash in a target direction and deal some damage. She enters a defensive stance with Riposte, during which she can't act, but prevents incoming damage and crowd control effects. After a short delay, she then strikes the enemies in front of her, stunning them if she managed to negate an immobilizing effect during this time. Her blade work empowers her next two attacks, with bonus range and attack speed. The first hit is a slow, while the second is a guaranteed critical hit. That leaves us with her ultimate, the Grand Challenge. Aside from passively increasing the speed granted by her Duelist Stance, she can trigger this to mark a singular enemy with 4 vitals. If she can hit at least one vital before the target dies, or manage to trigger all 4, she creates a victory zone that heals herself and her allies. Fiora does also appear in Legends of Runeterra, where she has the Challenger keyword, letting her pick her blocker when she attacks, and automatically wins the game if she defeats 4 enemies. Which, we're not going to be building that, just so you're aware. As to what we will be building, Fiora is a masterful duelist, using a rapier to strike at the vulnerabilities of her foes. Fast footwork, swift strikes, and a potentially paralyzing parry grant her a way to defeat enemies even outside of the tourney grounds. She can single out a foe for a duel, leaving behind a healing zone if she is able to claim victory over them. This is a build as straightforward as Fiora's own rapier, so get your blade up and let's allez. Right off the blade, Fiora will get some great use out of the human ancestry. I know I normally just kind of default to human, but there is some actual reasoning behind taking it here. However, rather than settling for a standard human heritage, we will be taking the Gonzi heritage. Now, Fiora is by no means a creature of chaos, but the extra bonus to resist becoming controlled is a nice nod to start with towards her riposte. And she can combine that bonus with her Haughty Obstinacy Ancestry feat, letting her more easily break free from attempts that seek to control or otherwise manipulate her. The +1 from her heritage will stack with anything this feat applies to, which is just a nice little bit of synergy. Noble is an eminently obvious choice for Fiora's background. This will make her trained in society and your choice of genealogy lore or heraldry lore. Be sure to talk with your GM and see which, if either, would fit the campaign better. This background affords her the Courtly Graces skill feat, showing the social maneuvering that she learned growing up, and has now had to make more use of since her family's own fall from grace. For our class, there is no more obvious choice than Alchemist. Swashbuckler. Got my notes mixed up. Fiora is the League's example of a swashbuckler, which has a lot of what she wants baked right into his kit that has seen a few changes with the remaster. Precise Strike is now just a constant bonus damage that applies to agile or finesse weapons. You don't need Panache, which is now gained by using actions with the Bravado trait to get this extra damage going. Speaking of Bravado, the Stylish Combatant class feature gives Fiora a +1 bonus on such actions while in a fight, and also gets her a bonus to her speed while she has Panache. This is already a nice little reflection of the movement speed from her Duelist Stance, and the Confident Finisher, which is unchanged, helps her represent her strikes on vitals. As to the actual choices for this build, we'll start with her style. Out of the options available, I think Fencer is the best to represent her character, who seems to be a very classically trained duelist. This means that her feints and create a diversion actions will have the bravado trait and grant her panache, both of which make an enemy more vulnerable to her, again representing the marking aspect of her duelist stance. She takes extravagant parry as her class feat, granting her a fantastic third action to raise her armor class, while also resembling her riposte with the increased protection that it affords. This has the added benefit of granting Fiora panache if a creature misses her in this state, which will be important down the line. In addition to Fiora's style automatically making her trained in deception, she becomes trained in acrobatics as a swashbuckler. She'll then pursue further training in athletics, intimidation, she's kind of a severe sort of gal, medicine, and stealth, which I will admit is mostly to take advantage of her dexterity, and I was having trouble settling on other options. As a proud Demacian, she doesn't want any of the magic related skills, and I don't see this noble roughing it to justify something like nature or survival. Now, we did just mention dexterity just a second ago, as we will be using that as our forever frowning fencer's primary ability score, but I also put quite a bit into charisma to help with Fiora's fighting style, making it easy for her to pull off a feint or diversion. Striding into second level sees us play into Fiora's epithet by taking up the Duelist dedication, which in turn nets her the quick draw feat. Weapons are kind of always out in leagues, so this isn't particularly reflective of anything, but action compression is always nice, and that's not all we want out of this archetype. But before we can get into that, we have the quick jump skill feat to look at, a certified build classic that feeds into the aforementioned action compression. You could also think of this as a little bit like her lunge. This is an ability that Fiora can use in-game to go over walls, and this feat is probably the best way to interpret that. Though, it is also kind of fun to imagine her just stabbing forward so hard that she pierces through the wall. Third level actually ends up being a little crowded, so let's start small for our superb swordsman. A skill increase will make her an expert in acrobatics, but then Stylish Tricks comes with a skill increase in the remaster, meaning that she'll also become an expert in deception, as this increase can only be spent on acrobatics or her style's skill. This feature also grants her a skill feat from one of these options, and I'm going to start with a Catfall, for a classic that will also come with some action compression down the line. Then, this level still has a general feat to it, which will be spent on Fleet. This stacks with the speed boost from her Vivacious Speed, both playing into the movement increase from her Duelist stance. Finally, Fiora gets Opportune Riposte at this level. A reaction lets her strike back against enemies that critically fail to hit her. Obviously, this is a way to represent her riposte, and comes with Bravado to grant her panache when she uses it, and it also combos nicely with the AC bonus of her extravagant parry. Coming in at 4th level is the main reason behind our dip into Duelist, the Duelist Challenge.
Is this supposed to be a challenge?
This lets her single out an enemy, marking them for death in a vein similar to how she targets an enemy with Grand Challenge. Admittedly, this benefit is merely extra damage, but it stacks with her precise strike damage, and can reflect the extra damage she is able to trigger with the 4 vitals that she creates. Her skill feat is a bit of a callback to her last level, with Rolling Landing building out of Catfall, letting her use a reaction after falling to keep moving. This is another form of action compression, letting her get some more movement as a reaction just from falling. But you have to be careful with that. We have a lot of reactions in this build, and Swashbucklers in particular have a lot of good ones, so you'll just have to keep in mind what you want to use for any given round. Speaking of, we will be getting yet another reaction for Fiora at 5th level. By taking Natural Ambition as her Ancestry feat, she'll be able to reach back to her 1st level class feat and gain You're Next. We will be expanding on our Intimidation investment down the line, and if Fiora starts a turn by downing an enemy, this could be a fantastic reaction to use to call out her next victim, and combo for a few fun effects. She does also get a regular skill increase to become expert in Society, as well as a boost to intelligence that makes her trained in performance. There are a couple cool options at 6th level. I'm presently leaning towards reactive strikes for times when an enemy is trying to escape, which could kind of play into the blade work for our blitzing baddie, but I was also looking at finishing follow through. I had thought that this could maybe lead into a fun combo with Your Next and a future feat I have in mind, but there's 2 issues here. 1, it only triggers off of finishers, and following that, 2, you can't use any attack actions in a turn after using a finisher. So you can't use a finisher to gain this panache, and then leap to another enemy and use a finisher on them as well. In fact, you can't even attack that second target, which is a design decision that I'm not exactly sold on. A much simpler choice for this level is Leverage Connections, which is a skill feat that builds out of courtly graces. This is reflective of Fiora starting to rebuild her family's glory, of regaining connections with the other noble families of Demacia. Level 7 is another stylish trick level, which means Fiora becomes a master in acrobatics and deception, allowing her to pick up Kip Up as her stylish trick feat. Always a good grab, and she couples it with incredible initiative, letting her attack first and take the lead in a furious flurry of a fight. Through the use of Extravagant Parry, Fiora can set up the defensive aspect of her riposte, and 8th level gives her Stunning Finisher, representing the follow-up strike that she can use to potentially stun her victims. Using this over 2 rounds, it would likely look like her fainting, making a confident finisher, and then setting up an Extravagant Parry. If the enemy misses her, she gets panache and can start next round with a Stunning Finisher to capture it. But then she won't be able to make any other attacks that turn and will be out of panache. On the topic of panache though, Fiora captures Confabulator for her catalog of feats, making it easier for her to use Creative Diversion multiple times against an enemy if she keeps critically failing her feints against them. For Fiora's 9th level feat, she takes Glory and Valor, an option originating from her Gonzi heritage. While it is only once per day, this gives her the ability to heal herself, further representing her Duelist stance with the health it restores when she hits a vital. With the intent of her wanting to rebuild her family's honor, she uses a skill increase to become a master in society. We're picking up more finishers at 10th level with Targeting Finisher. This can specifically be used to target enemies' legs and reduce their speed, representing the slowing first strike of her blade work ability. Quick and easy then, she takes Slippery Prey as her skill feat, letting her more easily slip from her enemy's grasp when they try to capture her. It's a little inspired by her ability to escape crowd control with her riposte. As I've described in past League builds, Fast Recovery is a stand-in for a health regeneration found in the game, but at a much slower rate, which is why it is used as Fiora's 11th level general feat. Then, as I promised, we start taking that investment in Intimidation through her skill increase, making her expert in it. We can probably cover Lunge just by taking multiple actions, but Mobile Finisher at 12th level reminds us that 2 action good, but 2 actions in 1, even better. This lets her stride and then make a finishing strike as a single action, which could combo fantastically with something like You're Next if she hasn't already used a finisher this round. Speaking of You're Next, she will take Intimidating Glare as her skill feat, so that she can demoralize creatures that don't understand her, such as something perhaps like Primitive Dragons. Now I'm certain there are some folks out there that disagree, but I am sticking with Stubborn Persistence as Fiora's 13th level general feat, and you can't change my mind. This can let Fiora fight through her own tiredness to keep going, which feels pretty right for her, before we spend her skill increase to become a master in Intimidation. Vivacious Bravado might seem a bit strange at 14th level, but stick with me for a second. Glory and Valor is a fantastic fit for the healing of Fiora's Duelist stance, but it can only be activated once per day. This extra action, which requires her to have Gain Panache, gives her some temporary hit points as another option to achieve this effect, and to do so a bit more regularly. Her skill feat will then be yet another reaction with Skeptic's Defense based on the classic distrust that Demacians have towards magic. There's no real mention of it specifically in regards to Fiora, but she does exemplify several aspects of Demacia, and has the investment in Intimidation necessary to pull it off. Once again at level 15, we've got a stylish trick, meaning that Fiora can become a legend in Acrobatics and Deception, and also pick up Fleeing Diversion, using yet another reaction to move after she creates a diversion. On a success, this will give her panache based off of her Fencer style, so she can immediately follow it up with a finisher. It is worth keeping in mind that Fiora is a melee combatant, and uses Toughness as her 15th level general feat, so that she has just a bit more sustainability. Rounding out things that we've gained at this level is Keen Flare, which gives her a critical hit with weapons that she's mastered when she rolls a 19. There's no overwhelming strike for the Swashbuckler, So that's how we're going to try to cover the second strike of her blade work. This isn't new, but it is cool and is directly relevant to the build, which is why I wanted to bring it up. Level 16 is the first of the final 5 for our Fervent Fencer, and it sees her take Revitalizing Finisher, a class feat that didn't exist until the remaster. This is a finisher that grants Fiora and her allies temporary hit points when she uses it, a fantastic representation of the victory field that she creates with her grand challenge. She used Battle Cry as her skill feat, letting her make an enemy frightened before the fight even begins, so that they are more vulnerable to her first moves. Further covering the healing capabilities of Grand Challenge is Heroic Presence at 17th level, giving her a way of shoring up the defenses of herself and her allies. Now just a quick point of order, these are both temporary hit points rather than proper healing, so it doesn't quite fit, but is far easier to attain for a build like this. She accompanies this level with an increase in society to become a legend in that as well. I will say that my sole complaint with the Swashbuckler's Opportune Riposte is that it only triggers on a critical failure, but we can fix that slightly with Parry and Riposte, which makes it so that any attack that misses triggers this reaction, as long as Fiora meets a few of its requirements, such as damaging the target with a finisher and having the bonus AC from her extravagant parry. She can also send foes running with Terrified Retreat as her skill feat, allowing her to inflict lower leveled enemies with fleeing when she critically succeeds at an attempt to demoralize them. Alright, there's no fear in Fiora's kit, which is usually what I use this for, but skill feats are honestly a hard pick for her, and for these kinds of build in general, and the focus on fear feels right for such a severe character. Fear and arousal, sorry. Even with over 20 of them in the build already, Fiora is light on her feet, leading to her taking Feather Step as her general feat. Her final skill increase then makes her a legend in Intimidation, which means that she can now use Your Next as a free action. A big boon for this blade-bearing badass. 20th level is not an easy choice. I really liked the looks of Inexhaustible countermeasures, but am a little annoyed on how restrictive it is. I wish this behaved more like Slinger's reflexes instead of only working for a total of 2 reactions, but we've invested a bit in her ability to parry, so if you want to go that way, have at it. I think, ultimately, the Panache Paragon is the better choice for her though. It makes her permanently quickened, which is always fantastic, even if this is limited to bravado actions. This increase in action economy should also make it easier to slip in her Scared to Death skill feat. Look, I've managed to resist for a few builds now. I honestly think I have shown some considerable restraint, but I could only keep away from this for so long. It is the best skill feat. Now before we go scoring this duel, let's talk free archetype. Obviously, Fiora makes use of the Duelist dedication, and can benefit from its feats such as Watch This, giving her more damage, Disarming Twist to divest enemies of their weapons, and maybe Disarming Stance to increase that chance of success. Other options she could explore include, in what may be a strange turn, an Investigator dedication. This will let her use Investigator Stratagem to make a test roll, which could help when it comes to deciding what, if any, finishers to use, or otherwise adjust her strategy. It may also be used to represent the vitals that she can identify on her victims, I mean opponents. We have conquered the challenge set forth by this Grand Duelist, so let's go ahead and review what we've made. Fiora Laurent, the Grand Duelist, is a Gonzi human swashbuckler who employs the Fencer style. She comes from a noble background and is trying to raise her family to its former glory, as seen with her courtly graces and leverage connections. The various finishers of her Swashbuckler class can represent the extra damage dealt by striking the vitals of her Duelist stance. The extra speed of it comes from Fleet, as well as the Vivacious Speed class feature, enhancing her movement, while its healing can come from her Valor and Glory or Vivacious Bravado. She uses a mobile finisher to represent her Lunge, dashing and striking an enemy with a deadly blow for a single action. The more defensive aspects of her riposte come from her extravagant parry, with the Opportune Riposte creating the following strike. She expands upon this with Stunning Finisher to have a chance at stunning an enemy as though she had negated an immobilizing effect. Alternatively, if she just wants to slow them down, there is her targeting finisher, which also resembles the first strike of her blade work ability. While the second is usually a guaranteed crit, we don't quite have that in this build, though the Swashbuckler's Keen Flare increases her critical strike range. She represents the targeting of her Grand Challenge through the Duelist challenge, allowing her to single out an enemy to inflict extra damage to, resembling the vitals that she marks her target with. This deft Duelist dishes out devastating defeats to the degenerates that dare to daunt her, deliberately deciding on a doomed disputant to dedicate her deep damage to. That is another remaster build in the bag. I'm kind of trying to mix doing that while also covering requests and getting a few personal projects worked in as well. Speaking of which, let me know what you think of this build and what other builds you'd like to see in the comments. You can check out other builds I've done or some item suggestions for this build over on the Monster Monday blog, Twitter, or Discord, which are all linked in the description. Thank you, as always, for watching, and have a fantastic Friday.
Talent, honor, discipline, and pretty pictures.